Welcome to the Parts and Labor Podcast, the podcast that explores the strategies, systems, and stories that drive salon success. I'm Alicia, founder and CEO of SalonScale.
And I'm Whitney, head of sales here at SalonScale.
And welcome to the Parts and Labor Podcast.
Welcome back to the Parts Plus Labor webinar. Welcome back to the Parts Plus Labor Podcast. My name is Whitney.
And I'm Alicia.
And today we are going to talk about a bit of a hot topic, which is why are people willingly paying hundreds of dollars for a 20-minute Botox appointment, but balk at a 5-hour, $400 color appointment?
It is definitely a hot topic. I think it's interesting to understand, a consumer and really get behind why they value certain things or what would make them invest in those kinds of things. And so there is this little stigma in the salon space, which is, this fear or this understanding of, is a customer going to think that I'm charging too much, or am I, out of range of what they think the value is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's interesting is that there's probably a lot of overlap between different clients. I would find it hard to believe that somebody would be willing to spend, $500 to $1,000 getting an injectable Botox, yet not have their hair done or have, their roots showing, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of overlap and kind of like those luxury clients that care about their appearance. But the models for, the salon industry and then these kind of medical injectables is completely different. Whereas the salon industry kind of takes those product costs and their costs and really hides it into, is meticulously, hides it into their pricing and is very, very kind of protective about not wanting to show the customer what it costs. Whereas injectables leads with that cost. In fact, that makes up usually the entire cost is the price per unit. Now it's extraordinarily marked up, but I think what they did right is they really set it up to where there's no emotion attached with their pricing at all. It's you pay per usage and it's per unit. And so there's, if you use a certain amount of units, it's this price and there's no negotiation or surprise that goes into that.
Yeah, I think, when we're thinking injectables and we're thinking of Botox, like in general, they start with the product first and then they go into service second. Mm-hmm. So it's, usually you're having a conversation where it's like, what are we looking to do today? And the outcome is to, improve, maybe not have some wrinkles. And then, from that kind of thing, they start with the product first. So like what product or what materials would I need to be able to address these types of areas, and then we go into where they would be injected, how many spots, and then they would price that way. Whereas it's reversed with salons and stylists. So we would start with okay, what is your desired outcome? Okay, here's how I would do it. So here's how I'd foil it. Here's where I'd place all the color. Here's all, and then they go into the products second. So they go service first, then product. Mm-hmm. And so those are the only thing that's different in the consultation is they're there. So for some reason in the spa space, or when we think of aesthetics that are more injectables or these types of services or treatments, they start with, again, here's what you want, here's the products used, here's what I will do to accomplish that, here's the price. In the salon space, again, a little different. Oh, you want this? Here's how I would do all the things. And then I rarely am going to tell you what products I'm using. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to use this tone or this, because, it becomes one of those things is if I say I'm going to use toner 9P with 9V or whatever, it's it might be something that might not make sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas, it's a little bit different with the spa side of things. And so with that kind of reverse, it's we've kind of trained ourselves to just not talk about it. Mm-hmm. And kind of package price or put it all in. And to get that, yeah, for sure, I'll cover it. Almost in an essence, it's just kind of not including, what ingredients you need mm-hmm. to get to that desired outcome.
Yeah. And I think that there's a big perception too, with Botox versus color, that a lot of it, obviously you need a medical injector. Not anyone can just inject Botox, but similar to the way you would want a licensed stylist. You want somebody who is trained, because it is a lot of training. And we were talking about this right before we started filming, you have to know a lot. You need to know color theory. You need to know where to put the foils to reach a desired outcome and make your client happy. That's a lot of pressure. But I would say too, like with the medical injection, like a lot of the presumed price is like coming from the actual product itself. Whereas, you know, it's costs them on average $5 or $6 per unit, but they're marking it up to 10 or 12, 10 to 14. And so there's a huge markup there. So this kind of like luxury Botox product, it costs half as much as you think that it does. And they're really, probably the bulk of the cost is that medical injector's time. And I think the difference, a perception difference with the salon industry is that the color is like dirt cheap, that it doesn't make up like a huge portion of the bill. And so what clients are paying for is time, which, you know, over the course of like a 5 or 6 hour appointment, yeah, a lot of it's going to be time, but the products aren't really cheap anymore either. You know?
No, and like that's where you can use those products like as an advantage, right? So if you bring that into your consultation and you know that if I used this type of formulation that has a bonder or a pH plus in it or something that is going to enhance the hair, and that tube or that unit is $10 versus $8 for the basic, you know, products that you had before, you can also use this where when you're talking through that consultation, it's like, okay, we're gonna, you know, maybe let's say we're doing an all over brunette, right? So it's like I can use this ingredient or these materials that will be exactly the outcome, the tone, everything will be there. But if you want ultra shine and you want extra protein, I can also use this line. It'll cost X amount more.
Or low tox. Like a lot of people are switching to the more like lower toxic brands too, which are more expensive. And so that's another thing you can offer too. Well, you know, we can use this line on you, but it comes with this kind of price. But I think, you know, exposing that, like the true cost, like I think there's a shift happening where it was seen as kind of like nickel and dimey to kind of expose the price before of what it costs. Whereas if the whole industry gets on board as this is luxury, these are materials that just you can buy with a license, that makes it a luxury item. Not anybody can just go out and buy these things. And so where I think the medical industry did really well is they all got on board with that. You know, you're not going to find an injector that charges, you know, $1 over wholesale for each one. It's all seen as luxury. You all expect to pay a premium price for it, but they all got on board with that kind of mindset. And I don't think that there's any reason why the salon industry can't get on board with that mindset too. Like, we're professionals that can only provide and buy this color, and, you know, it can be specified exactly to what you need today using our skill.
Yeah, and I think, you know, another thing that the med spa industry has done really well is they've really marketed that this is an investment, right? So like you're investing in your future self. So preventative care, preventative wrinkles, you know, it's like you're investing in yourself to help you along the way. So a consumer going to get a treatment like that biannually, annually, whenever, they're looking at investing in themselves and their own care to help improve their overall beauty, and they look at it as an investment. In the salon space, you know, a lot of times it's not necessarily always looked upon as an investment, rather than I need to cover up roots. I need to, like, it's more of like, I have to get these, like, I gotta clean this up. It feels more like a little bit different. And so when we have these like high dimensional services that we can provide that are luxurious, that are an investment, you know that if you invest really well in your hair care, as a consumer, that style will last you a lot longer than having to come back every month to get your hair done, right? So it's really kind of selling it, like I think in the salon space, is like really selling this as investing in your hair. So, you know, if someone has a desired outcome to get X, you know, if we want to take those steps to get into that, we're going to invest in, you know, 2 or 3 sessions to get yourself there. Then we go on maintenance care, and maintenance looks like every 3 months. Here's what we're looking at. So it's like leaning into being that true trade, like professional of your trade, where it's like, you know, as we look at what where we're going and how we want to maintain it. Here's the plan for you. You know, it's like if you can get your clients to really see, you know, at least their year map of like what we're going to do for the year, now you've set them up on a path where they're going to continue to come to you. It's no different than, again, a lot of the medical professionals that are doing injectables do the same thing. So they'll tell you, you know, today we're going to do this. We suggest to do this every 9 to 12 months, so we can go ahead and book you. Like they'll book you right through, and they keep, you know, a lot of good notes as far as, you know, what they did, how they use the product, so that they can continue on that care, that path to where the desired outcome is.
And when we look at, you know, their industry, kind of their profit margins and their revenue base, like they're winning. Like when we look at their average revenue, a medical spa brings in an average of $2 million in revenue. And their profit margins on average are between 20 and 40%, which is obviously wildly different than the salon industry. Now, there's factors you can't control. You can't control, you know, you can't service a client in the salon industry for color anyway in 20 minutes like you can in an injectable. But you can really nail down your profit margins, and how they do that and how most industries do that is knowing the product costs and ensuring that that's paid for. You know, Botox isn't going to, you know, double in price tomorrow, and they're going to charge you what they charge today, right? Like every other industry really stays on top of profit margins and what it costs, and make sure point blank first, like their product is covered, particularly as it continues to go up.
Yeah, I think like, you know, the biggest like, I guess like cheater or cheat sheet way for thinking about it as a hairstylist is like, if you start with your variable costs, like these are product costs, they're going to be different for everyone. So if you actually flipped it around like we originally talked, and you start with product and then you add your service, essentially what you do is a multiplier by 10. So if you create a formula, you used a bunch of product, let's say you used $18 worth of product, you times that by 10, that's exactly around where you should be charging the client. It's about $180. Like that allows you to make sure that you have at least a good range. 10% of that service is the product, and the rest of it's going to go right into your labor, your income side. So that is like the easiest, quickest back math calculation to go buy the product first and then add your service on, versus go service first and then try to somehow include the product in. And so I find that I always like challenge anyone. I was like, okay, go ahead and like take a day of like behind the chair and like look at all the clients. Like if you did 3-4 services, and then just, you know, write down those formulas, use Salon Scale. You can use our app for free, but you can go ahead and use it, and you can see what would those would have cost me, and you can see if it was like 18, 25, 60, whatever, right? And if you multiply it, so if you use $60 worth of product, you should be charging within range of $600. So if you use $60 worth of product, and let's think about those balayages with extra, you know, shadow roots and toners and all that stuff. $60 of product was used. The average person charging for a balayage is closer to $200. So when you should have been charging $600 for that service, you're off by a huge margin, which then goes to show you that you're not pricing to really maximize your profit.
And would you say that is specifically for commission salon owners or across the board?
I would just go straight across. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, everything, whether it's commission or you work for yourself, there is like, you have room as a soloist, you do have room to have stronger margins, but you have buying power as a commission salon owner, right? And then you have multiple people bringing multiple more in. So you might have a little bit less profit margin at the end of the day, but you have multiple sources of it, whereas you have higher margins as a soloist, but there's only one, you're the only one. If you don't work, you don't make money, right? And so regardless of it, that's the standard that you're talking about. That's the standard. It's either like, you got to look at these. This is just simple math. Like it's just math. It's math to maximize profitability. So either start with your product costs, multiply by 10. That should be your range, or you go the other way where you have your menu and you've factored in what you've factored in all your variable costs, all your fixed costs, divided out by how many hours you're open. You know, it's like breaking it down to what is the bare minimum an hour that will keep the lights on in this place. That plus your labor, and then add your parts on also gives you this. So it's like that gives you your parts and service as well. But no matter what you're doing, it's really actually a very simple equation. I think the number one thing that we're talking about today that a lot of salons get wrong is we think this variable cost, well, it's just a small thing. If I just charge more or if I just do these high tickets, but at the end of the day, that foundation, that product cost is not going to stay flat. It's always going to increase with inflation. It's always going to increase customer to customer because everybody has a variable different amount of hair, different density. And again, like we said in the spa space, you know, you're using half a syringe, a full syringe. The error of waste is not high. Whereas in the salon space, you can't put it back in the tube. Right? Once it's out, it's out. And so if you really wrap your head around that, whereas like, would I want to make sure that I'm not only pricing to make sure my product costs are covered, but I'm sure I'm making good profit, like I'm making my margin every single time. Like you're gonna live your life feeling so much more successful, and just you're gonna see exactly, you know, what that's like versus like the guessing and the stressing.
Let's say you do have a salon that's charging, like you said, on average $200 for a balayage, and they're using $60 worth of product. Well, you can't do that kind of big jump, triple in price overnight. What steps would you take to kind of get them to being able to increase their prices?
Well, again, it's consultation, right? So a customer coming in, like this is where we have to really get really strong at consultation. If a customer coming in wants this desired look, and you know it's going to take at least 4 bowls of color, and your average bowl of color is $20, let's say, like you know you're going to have $80 worth of product to use on to that desired plus the hours needed, right? So if that customer is there and you do a quick calculation estimating product cost is 80, it's going to take me 3 hours, let's say I charge $100 an hour, it's $380, then I would then say to the client, like, what's your budget today? Like, are we within range? Based off what you want, it's going to take this much time, probably cost around this much, and this is about the range that it's going to be. Like, if it's not within the budget, then we need to, you know, course correct. We need to be able to say what you want is going to be that. What we can do is a simplified version. We could, you know, focus on foiling around the front of your face for right now, and then cut back a little bit of those costs so that we can, you know, put you more in range of your budget. Like budget. Be so not afraid to talk about what that client is expecting to pay that day, because that's your compass, right? So what they want, how much they want to pay. It now is your job to break down how that is possible.
And I'll say, like, the last salon I went to too, it was like electronic. So if you're afraid of those kind of like conversations, like those awkward conversations, like if you're just kind of starting out and that's kind of an awkward question to ask, like the salon I went to before, like the consultation was me filling out kind of this form online when I was sitting there, and yeah, what's your budget today? What's your maintenance look like? So they kind of were able to like review all those questions and then talk with me, like they had the answer already, so we could kind of talk about it too.
I think there's a big difference between a technical service, you know, and we think of like, especially when think of the med spa space, there's a slight bit of creativity to it, but a lot of it is scientifically, you got to place it in these certain areas because this is where it needs to go, right? And in the salon space, doing hair, there is some form of knowing like where to foil. You can't, you know, you got to foil above the brow ridge or below it, or like if you want more light, like you know those different areas of placement, but it kind of borderlines over on more of the creative side, or artistic side. So if you think of an artist, you know, an artist creates their art. They usually put it in a gallery, and then they don't really factor in a lot of like all those products, all that stuff. They establish their worth kind of like later. Like it's not like they break it down, and that's kind of where we've kind of pushed the salon space, is like really more on the artistic side of like that really hits like into that core, into that like my worthiness, right? So like that's where the insecurity comes from in talking it through. Like if an artist, as they're painting, you know, it's like several hours later they're finally finishing up, and then they're like, someone was like, how much is this worth? Like it could be priceless, you know. It's like it depends on really that artist and like what's kind of going on. So like to ask someone directly, I'm sure that artist would say, oh, I don't know, like what would you pay, right? It's like it's so personal. And you know, that's where I think it gets really like tough when it comes to really taking the emotion away and then thinking of it as more like facts or what it was. So I think that, you know, when we look at pricing, there's in general, when you look at any of it, you know, we have to understand these hard costs, like what does it cost me to do the product costs. Then we have to understand the technical ability to kind of do that stuff. Then that last little bubble of artistic flair, that's what kind of gives you your range. So everything else should be the standardized price, and then the range of it going from 100 to 200 or 100 to 500, that is the artistic flair that gets added on top. Like that's your worthiness on top. But if you're not even covering those first two, then you're not at that level of being able to get there yet, right? Maybe you're still kind of exploring it. But it's in that range that, you know, I've seen the salon space too, where it's like, how do we quantify this, or how do we talk about this, or you charge this, oh, I will too. And then there's kind of a little bit of internal like, well, how do we factor this, or how do we come up with this price? And it's because there's that slight little element of artistic you know, and creativity that comes into the work that we do. That's where it becomes a little bit murky when it comes to setting these prices. So I think, you know, coming back to how we're talking is like, why don't we take inspiration from some of these other sectors, such as the med spa space, and you know, what are they doing? What are all these other industries doing? Whether it's home building, whether it's like any kind of industry that's of trade. And if they're doing parts and service, or they're kind of separating, they understand their hard costs, they understand those kinds of things, and you know, they have that as a base price, and then, you know, kind of figure out how do I find that foundation within the salon space, and then from there is when you go into that kind of, well, what level, like what level is my art worth, or what level is this? Are we a full luxury, like we're a high-end home building company? Well, you're going to be charging a lot more because it's a high-end with experience builder, right? And so like, I think just kind of factoring those things or breaking them down is important, and the more you understand that, the more you can communicate it to your customers. And really understanding those is critical when it comes to it. Having really strong confidence in your consultations is evident that is a key factor in creating a lot more consistency behind the chair. But most importantly, it's really understanding that at the end of the day, you aren't the one that's paying, like the consumer is. So get really, really good at understanding who your customer is, so that you can really, you know, service it to the best you possibly can.
I think I have nothing to add to that. I think that was a perfect summary. I think that makes complete sense. I love the first two. Make sure those are covered. Make sure like the bills are paid, the product's covered, and then add kind of your flair on top. So I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. And you're going to have to end this because Casey says I do a terrible job.
Well,
so
you know what? Ahead. Thanks, Casey. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and looking forward to having you on the next one.
And you do a terrible job too. Sorry, Casey.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.